Sher, welcome to the Creative Gap podcast. It's good to have you.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I've been hoping to do this for months. When I met you in LA for the screening of I Think I'm Sick, I had something in my brain telling me, I want you on my podcast. And it was it about a year or so ago? And I've been determined to kind of build up the podcast to be able to have something that I think would be worth your time. And I just appreciate you being here.
Hey, it's going to be a good time. We'll learn some stuff. Let's
Definitely.
go.
So there's a theme or something that I've been interested in, and it's not really filmmaking related, but joy is something that we could all experience in life one way or another, a choice, or you could choose to be joyful, you can choose not to be. And in a particular point in your life, you could be joyful about one thing, and another point you could be joyful about another. But at this moment in your life, what brings you the most joy?
That's a great question. And you're absolutely right. You could choose to be joyful. And this is something that I think even me and everybody sort of have to make that choice. It's not something, life can sort of fight against that at times. For me right now, my family gives me joy. My wife, my kids, my older son who just started college brings me tons of joy. Baseball right now brings me joy because the Yankees Dodgers, that's something I was really hoping for all season. So that Carlo like watching those games brings me joy, and hopefully Judge will start hitting, which will also give me joy. And every time I'm on a film set brings me joy. Filmmaking has always been a joyful experience for me. Prep and kind of the in-between time when you're sort of thinking about the next thing and all the different elements of that, I think are the times that I'm most stressed. But when we are actually making the movie one day at a time, that's all those days are really, really joyful. It's probably the best from a work experience. It's when I'm at my happiest.
Yeah. You said a quote in an article that said, being a cinematographer is the greatest job in the world. You're at the center of a storm, and I love the storm. That kind of speaks to your ability to kind of thrive under pressure and be happy in that scenario, whatever it is. Do you think that's an aspect of being a cinematographer, an artist, especially in a leadership position where you kind of have to enjoy the process of pressure?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And I think it's a skill that I find in almost every DP I know. I don't think you'd get there. I don't think you'd make it. I don't think you'd stay in it if you didn't enjoy that.
Right.
I remember reading all kinds of stories about the director of Risky Business, which is like one of the best movies ever. And he's like, I hated directing. And he hasn't directed really much since, even though Risky Business is like a perfect movie, And Todd Solondz, I've heard explain how like dreadful it is to be directing, and he's an incredible director. And so I think you have to really like it, particularly because every day that you're shooting is filled with just all kinds of challenges and all kinds of, sideways situations, where this happens and you have to change, which direction you're going and whatever. There are so many problems on a day-to-day that if you don't enjoy that and the problem solving, it'll be a miserable life.
It's not the job for you.
Yeah, exactly. You will not be having fun doing this. So I think it's a common quality in most DPs I know.
And you said something before that I kind of want to tap into a little bit more, and it's something that's really prevalent in my life right now. You said what brings you the most joy is like your family, also your wife, your kids, and being newly married. I've been with my wife. We dated for 10 years. We met in high school, and she's seen me throughout the entire process of my career, from the first time I picked up a camera to kind of where I am now. And being a father is something that I feel like is one of the most important things that hopefully will happen in my life one day. And also the idea of becoming a great cinematographer at your level is also something that is hopefully going to happen to me one day, and I aspire to create. How do you find the balance of being a present father in times of like where work is very prevalent and like you need to really focus on films and being away for 6 months. How do you manage that relationship and the communication with your family?
Talk to my wife. I don't do it well. It's the biggest challenge. It's absolutely the biggest challenge because the way my brain is wired, and that's not an excuse. I could rewire it, of course, and I need to. Once I start thinking about a project, it kind of infects my brain in a way that will spin around even when, I'm trying to be present. So all I would say is I could do better. And it's something I work on every single day and have to be reminded of. And it's in terms of just continuing even at 50s, and 54 is how old I am. And I'm still, working on it every day because your kids, and I have a 5 and a 7-year-old and I have an older son, they know when you're not present and you know when you're not present, but sometimes it really is hard to drag your brain away from some idea or
Right.
whatever you put away so you could have family time, right? And so it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge. Probably the greatest thing I struggle with as a human right now.
Is it?
Yeah, it's real. It's real, and it comes up all the time. Particularly as I get closer to a project, and I get into prep. Sometimes, in a way, when I'm shooting, it's a lot easier because shooting, it's like you've put aside all. The problem with prep, fundamentally, and this is for me, and I don't know if it's for other people,
Sure.
is you're making the whole movie every day, right? And so every day you could be cycling through every single scene, equipment list, crew, ideas, what you want. It's like there's never enough time and you can never shut it off. You could go 24/7 through prep. When you're shooting, what are we shooting today? We have this many hours.
Right.
That's a fixed quantity. And so in a way, the best days I am where I'm most present and able to sort of is on those shooting days. And even on the weekends, once we start shooting, it's in this kind of place where my brain is right now as I approach a new project. That is the most difficult for me to kind of stay present. Yeah.
I think the thing that I am trying to learn now and figure out with her is I naturally, when a project comes to me, my initial reaction most of the time is like, yes, wherever it is, however long, I'm just going to go and do it. But I kind of have to step back and then talk to her about the project. Like, is it, I don't even know how to approach it. Like, is it okay if we do this? Like, am I good to go for 2 weeks to a different country, for example? That's something that I'm learning, I guess, right now, how to communicate that with her.
Yeah, listen, that's every relationship, right? Communication's everything. And in this business where it's hard to say no to things because everything is an opportunity and sometimes it's the
Exactly.
money
It
thing.
feels like it might be the last when it's probably not, but it feels like that sometimes.
And trust me, I am in a very, lucky position to be able to say no to certain things and not have to take every single thing that comes my way. I still say yes to too many things. I do. I do. I say yes to a lot. And saying no is like, I think also one of those things you learn to do as you get older. And choosing sort of course, we have, just like a movie, our lives are a finite number of resources and time, right?
I think something I realized too about myself is maybe I put my identity too much in being a DP, that when I'm not doing that thing, it's like I'm always kind of thinking about wanting to do that thing. So maybe that's why I say yes a lot as well, is because I feel so invigorated when I am doing that thing.
Yeah, it's the juice. I
It
get
is,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also like a natural sort of antidepressant, and it's all the things that happen in a business in which every time we end a job, we're unemployed,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's true.
It's like you have to be okay with that. And certainly early on, it was every time you were like, where is this next job coming? And it can just be like a growing level of stress, particularly if it's a financial one. And even if that changes and the financial stress, maybe expands your window of having to worry a little bit more, it's always that conundrum of even exploiting the time you have off.
Right.
Right. And truthfully, it's only been the last couple of years where I've taken like proper vacations when I finish a job. not a week, not 2 weeks. I'm trying to take like 4 or 5 weeks, like a European.
Nice.
And
Love
I should have been doing
that.
that for 20 years.
Sure.
And I wasn't. And now I relish it. Even
What made
this
you
year.
realize you wanted to start
I
doing
think
that?
my wife was like, let's just do this. And what stinks about it now, of course you can't look backwards, is I truly was like, why have I not been doing this? Because often what I would do is finish a job, be so excited to now have time off, and then spend the whole time either anxious about where the next job was, and then suddenly you were on the next job and you felt like you didn't have that recharge time. So all I can say to anyone who's watching is like, do it as early as you can and make it part of your process, because man, I should have been doing it, and we have the fortunate, whether, and of course financial, but you could go out into the woods and do it for free, right? So it doesn't have to be a financial thing,
Yeah.
but
Doesn't have to be a glamour, like a huge thing.
we're not, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, 2 weeks off jobs. So we have like the thing that makes the job really challenging as far as like insecurity and job insecurity also gives you the freedom
Right.
to take advantage of that. And so I think, it one's a blessing, and take advantage of that blessing, that you could do anything you want with
Love
that
that.
time off.
Yeah.
And I wish I did that more.
I think something I also want to tap into a little bit is like during that time off, vacation and just like time away from film in general is really important, but also kind of working on your craft in a way to improve your ability as a filmmaker when you're not working. Are there things that you maybe did in the beginning or even that you do now to help improve your ability to grow as an artist or a DP when you're not working?
Probably more when I was young. And sometimes now I have to remind myself to do that. But early days, every waking hour I had that I wasn't shooting, I was trying to learn.
Do you think you have to have some sort of obsession?
I was obsessed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I took still pictures. This was pre a lot of camera stuff, and it was really only film, but I had Super 8 camera. It wasn't, so it was either still photography. They had camcorders and stuff, but in a weird way, camcorders never felt like I was training to be a DP. It felt like, I don't know, you were shooting home movies. I never looked at it as in that way. Maybe I should have, but still photography for me was like, okay, this is what I can learn. And so I constantly was taking pictures wherever I went, and learning that way, and creating little like photo assignments for myself, and then going out and shooting them. And now I have to sort of, sometimes I just want to let it go, and having a camera sometimes feels like a job.
Right. Especially when you do it for a living.
Yeah, and it's like I just want to let it go. And when I go on a trip, I don't bring like some special camera. I just bring my iPhone and go. But if I'm feeling in a creative rut, I go and I say, let me go take pictures again.
That's your outlet.
Yeah, more than motion pictures, but just stills.
Stills.
Yeah, because maybe the motion picture side of it feels, I don't know, feels like work when
Feels
I'm
too
still trying to
job-related?
like get away from it. But if I'm trying to be inspired, the still photography end of it can help get me out of that rut.
Do you feel more inspired by the stills that you take or by looking at stills from other people?
Anything. I mean, also just watching movies.
Right.
I'll try to get back into movie theaters because, the movie theater experience is still the most inspiring experience. And I sometimes forget, I'm as susceptible as any consumer or any viewer to the ease at which we're able to watch things, right? It's like there are so many different streamers. I mean, it's everything,
It's
right?
endless.
It's all at your fingertips. It used to be you go to like a rental store, Blockbuster, and there was something beautiful about sort of strolling through the aisles and finding something, and I miss that. Now it's like everything is at your fingertips, including massive distractions like Instagram and YouTube. And sometimes not distractions, sometimes inspiring, but still it's just a suck. And so how do you get out of that massive suck? And I am in the suck all the time. And then, I'll create little like, I'll save this for something. And so I have all these saved things that feel like I'm doing work or they're like inspiration, but I think it's just a time suck.
Yeah, I think Instagram for me has two sides, and it depends really where I am, I guess, in my life in that moment. I think it has to do with my career, really. If I feel busy, like I'm getting hired, I'm doing good work, financially feeling okay, Instagram for me is a place of inspiration. looking at all the DPs that I follow, the directors, everyone, seeing their work. But if I'm in a rut, if I haven't worked for a month or whatever, I haven't done anything, Instagram to me is an absolute pain. It kills me. My anxiety goes through the roof. And everything that I looked at that was once inspiring is now something that I can't even look at. And I don't want to look at it anymore. But I feel like I have to. It's tough.
Yeah, they really figured that shit out.
Yeah.
That is addicting as it gets. Yeah, yeah. And even me, I should be above that. I should have more discipline. All the things. It's like, yeah, it's like I doom scroll. I sit. It's just like it's hard.
Yeah. It's because I know it's wrong, and I know
That's
that.
what addiction is.
Yeah.
That's what addiction is, right? We know when something has a hold on us, right? And listen, there's a lot of those things have their value, right? I learned
sure.
things from Instagram and YouTube. Of course, when I'm looking for something and I'm trying to learn about something or see behind the scenes of how they did this,
amazing.
those are great sources.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and so they have great power for good, and they have great power to sort of,
Right.
for evil as well.
I think like along that, there's the idea of like what upcoming cinematographers are dealing with now versus when you were coming up as a DP, the different struggles maybe that we face are different, the pluses, like the access to equipment. But besides like the positive aspect of it, what do you think is something that you notice younger filmmakers and DPs struggling with more to kind of become successful in their field?
I mean, it's interesting. It's very similar. It's a double-edged sword, right? You have the ability to democratize everything, right? We can have small cameras, iPhones, DSLRs that can shoot incredible imagery that can end up on IMAX screens. So that has democratized and allowed everyone to basically be in the game. But it also means everybody's in the game. And so you have so many people out there competing for the same space, right? So now that's good. Like you don't want gatekeepers in the same way as there were before. And the gatekeepers were more just, it's a smaller field from which they were selecting who was going to shoot that next movie, right? And so you just wanted to get into that field. Now, I see all kinds of people from all across the world getting really cool jobs, and I love it, even if it's competition. But it also means that it's competition, right? And so it's all the things, right? It allows you to get in the game, and then it allows you. And now it's also you're competing against probably tenfold the number of people, So I don't know what different. It's funny when I look back at filmmaking, it kind of all felt the same.
Okay.
But if you even think about the democratization of the camera equipment, right? That also has a negative side towards all the rental houses. Because now suddenly
big time.
it's like there's too many lenses, there are so many camera bodies, and all the rental houses now, if they want to stay in the game, have to now compete by owning all that equipment. But the same equipment, whether it's Blackmagic or even, cameras like LFs and Sonys and all kinds of stuff can be owned individually by people.
Owner operators are huge now.
Massive. And that didn't really exist when it was film only. Sure, on some level, but you had to have trucks, and it was a bigger situation. And I think now you've also made it really hard on the rental houses, right? And their margins have gotten really small. So when something like COVID happens, it just demolishes people, right? And strikes and all that. So it's really interesting. I mean, there's always a balance. Everything sort of finds its equilibrium. And that's what, the sort of free market and all the sort of ways in which we work. And that will find itself. But it's interesting because we're competing against each other on some level. Of
course.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe not for the exact jobs right now, but in a year's time, sure, why not?
Excited to start building that business you've always dreamed of having? With Durable, you can build your website as quickly as 30 seconds. Using Durable is easy and fast, allowing you to focus on growing your business. With Durable, you don't need any coding or design skills, just some creativity. You can fully customize the look and feel of your website using Durable's AI platform to make sure that you're showcasing your business exactly how you want. Start for $12 a month to get a free custom domain name, built-in CRM tools, an invoice builder, SEO tools, an AI blog generator, and much more. Get your business online in 30 seconds with the #1 AI website builder and marketing platform. Create your new website at durable.co and use the code CreativeGap30 to save 30% on your first 3 months when you're ready to go live. Durable, the leading AI website builder for creatives and entrepreneurs like yourself. This episode is sponsored by Adorama and Adorama Rentals, a New York City-based camera, electronics, film retailer, as well as rent-a-house providing top-quality equipment, service, and rental gear for all your production needs. Adorama is more than just a camera store. It was created to be an all-around resource for photographers, filmmakers, and creatives alike. Adorama Rentals offers a wide array of equipment such as cinema lenses, cinema cameras, lighting, grip equipment, as well as top-tier customer service and tech support. For the last 3 years, I've used MusicBed to source all of my music for every project that I've created. From personal spec work to passion projects to narrative work, from YouTube all the way to this very podcast. The music that you heard in the beginning of this episode, that's also from MusicBed. The selection of music is highly curated and made for filmmakers and creatives. Authenticity and originality is extremely important to me, which makes MusicBed the perfect fit for my music selection. Their music is made by real artists, hand-selected, and less than 1% actually gets selected to be on MusicBed's platform. It's that attention to detail and quality that makes their library stand out. One of my favorite tools is their new AI search by song feature, which completely redefines the way you find music for your creative vision. It's no longer about spending hours searching. It's about instantly connecting with the right song. If you haven't made the switch yet, now's the time. Start your 14-day free trial today and see the difference MusicBed can make in your work. In terms of the creativity of your job and the creative process of working on a film commercial, I'm always interested by the idea of, is the creative process more about discovery or invention? Do you find that ideas are found or created, or is there a balance of both?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm sure there's a balance, right? It's like I just think about, they often start with me sort of just going in my own headspace and then trying to figure out where I want the camera to be, what I want this shot to feel like, and then often what I'll look for as far as inspiration is some example or a way, this is what ShotDeck was basically created for, to express that to another person that isn't just words, right? That there's some leaping off point. And often if you look at, the decks I build for every project I do, there's never a one-to-one about what it's going to look like. It's like there's an idea in my head and then I go, here's something, let's discuss what's good about this and what it isn't. And then we're going to basically create our own thing.
Right.
But at least it's a leaping off point to have that discussion, or at the very least, it's a leaping off point to discuss and figure out what the director or other participants in the process like or don't like, right? Because I find talking about creative things sometimes are really, esoteric and it's cerebral and amorphous. And to sort of get to a place of moving forward in the same direction, what better than to sort of give them images and see what they respond to.
Right. And it could be like a color of a shirt. It could be something in the background that they find.
Yeah, it's like what I would often say to a director who doesn't necessarily even think that they're that visual, and most are, but they might not be able to communicate it, is if you just start selecting images that you like, that'll tell me everything about you. I'll learn more about your preferences and style and things that you gravitate towards without you even expressing anything except for picking out some pictures, right? I'll go, oh yeah, you like austere things. You're okay with things that are busy. You like deep focus, shallow focus. You're not afraid of color. You like contrast. No, you actually don't like contrast. Or you like desaturation. You keep picking those images. That'll tell me things you would never express in words.
And it equally shows things that they don't like as well when they don't select it.
Absolutely. And that usually is a big part of the process. He's like, let's figure out what it isn't. And then we can sort of figure out what it is.
Right.
Yeah. So early days, I'm just thinking, because I'm about to start a new project. And so my brain is in that kind of, what are the sort of the keystone elements that might create the creative style of this show or movie, right? In this case, it's a movie. And so I might think of it may be shots in this case. And so, the talks that I'll have with the director this week will be expressing those shots and seeing if that sort of also feels like it's in line with what they want to do. And then we'll go into the place of like, okay, how could we execute this?
Right.
And what's the intent of it? Like what first of all, why are we doing this shot? And then let's figure out how to execute it. And then let's also then figure out like the look of it and what is the look that's going to make it feel original and unique and more than anything sort of emotionally resonant with the story.
I'd love to hear about how you approach conversations with the director in that setting where it might not be reciprocated. Like, oh, I like this idea as a DP, but they don't.
It happens all the time. Yeah, it's often, that's probably the diplomacy and the kind of, the part of the job that probably is also really important is how can you successfully pitch an idea?
Sure.
How can you react and move on from when your idea gets shot down? And it might be an idea you're really excited about.
And not take it personally.
And not take it personally, not sulk and keep pitching good ideas the next day and the next hour and the next minute. But move on and let them have that authority, which they should and do, which is to be the ultimate arbiter of which direction the whole thing goes. And that takes that. It's like with every new job, and if it's a new director or a new team of people, every relationship is like starting a new relationship.
Right.
And so you have to, give and take in all the ways in which all relationships are. And so the good news is, let's say I pitch some ideas, all right, and I haven't even really gotten deep in the weeds with this new project, and they get shut down immediately. The good news is it probably means that director has a very keen sense of what they want to do.
Right.
So at least I can move off that idea. You almost want like a fast no, then like it takes forever to get to know. You go, great, okay, that's not it. And then your brain can switch to going, okay, what's the thing they're looking for? And now I'll come up with something new that maybe is still exciting, but is now in line with their vision. So you start by just sort of expressing the idea and picking the right moments because directors have so much they have so many things to do and so little bandwidth, right? And so it's also finding that perfect spot in their day, when they're in a good mood.
Right. I was gonna say that has to be a good point too, is their mood will dictate a lot of how they respond.
Yeah, and that's just like reading the room, right? That's a big part of the job. It's not just a technician. It's not just somebody creative. You have to be a diplomat. You have to be good at understanding your place in the budget and being reasonable. You have to be all these things, but also just really understanding human behavior and personalities and feeling them out and knowing what's the best strategy. When can I catch the director where they're in the best headspace to be open to this idea, right?
Has that come from experience? Because I talked to Eric Koretz, he did Ozark.
Sure.
And he said he studied human psychology a lot, and he found it to be really important. But then I've talked to other DPs where it's just more like you figure it out as you go.
I think it's just intuition.
Yeah.
I think if you continue to not read the room, you may be autistic. But also, if you're not autistic, no offense to autistic, but I mean, literally like undiagnosed autism.
Sure.
Because at some point you're like, read the room. Right. And that's fine. So then now deal with your autism and still find a way to get in there. You could be very successful and you could own Twitter and be autistic.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that I don't have to study psychology to sort of do that, but you also fuck up sometimes, and you're like, oh fuck, I picked the wrong spot, or I'm in a bad mood, I have been eating well or sleeping well, and I just rubbed them the wrong way, and now I have to go sort of, it happens all the time. It happens throughout the process of making the movie. It happens during prep. It's one of the most fundamental things to making a movie is trying to get those ideas. God, it's everything, right? It's also the most important thing about making a movie is the human side, because it's not just the experience you have making the movie. That's the one thing you can control, right? You can't control the outcome. Right. You can't control how the audience reacts to it. You can't control, its box office. So that part you want to get right. But also it's the most important thing you're trying to connect to when you watch a movie is the human story.
Absolutely.
And so the better you are at that, the better you're probably going to be at your job. Yeah.
You said something about serving or kind of pitching ideas, and that's something I'm learning about myself right now at the stage of the career that I'm at. Because I felt very stagnant in my career where maybe I wasn't progressing the way that I wanted to. The work that I was doing was good, but it wasn't where I hoped it would be. And I kept asking myself, like, is it the people I'm working with? Is it the directors not wanting to push? And then I had a realization, like, is it me? Like, am I the problem? And I
Yeah,
recognize,
Taylor Swift.
yeah,
I'm the problem. She's really fucking,
yeah,
she's a
she's good.
genius though.
But
I make
I
fun of
asked
her, but
myself
she
that.
really pares it down. It is you in the
Yeah,
sense of, first of all, always looks at yourself as
absolutely.
like, because that's also the part you can make adjustments to, right? You can't make
Right,
adjustments to them. I
right.
mean, you can't make them change, right? So even if it's not you, even if you go objectively, what am I doing here? If you just look inward, you probably can help the situation by making an adjustment on your side.
And I did. And I recognized that I wasn't pushing myself or the director in a positive, like I just was doing the bare minimum or the basic thing to get the job done. In a way, maybe I was trying a couple things here or there, but I wasn't stretching myself as a DP. I wasn't experimenting. I wasn't trying things to actually prove that I'm able to do these bigger
Yeah,
jobs or
yeah.
whatever.
That's the path of
Yeah.
least resistance.
And I think lately I've been really trying to make an effort of how do I push myself, but also push the director enough for them to also want to do it as well. Because sometimes you can't push if they are in a particular place, they are going to be there.
Well, and they have also a bunch of things that they're trying to figure out. So, like, even if you're trying to push some really creative shot,
Mm-hmm.
they might be like, I'm just trying to make this actor say these words. And I've been in a
Exactly.
meeting for 2 hours in the makeup trailer where they hate the script, and now I just want to fight through to get this day. And so you have no idea what their day has been.
Mm.
And suddenly you come in and you're like, I got this great idea. And
Yeah.
they're just going, I hope they stand on a mark and we don't even touch the camera and they can just say it so I can get
Mm.
through with this, you know?
Right.
And so that sort of idea, that's also reading the room and
Mm-hmm.
understanding where they're at. And that's why I'm like, let's choose prep and other places to do it. And sometimes just eat it, man.
Yeah.
Eat it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Todd and I got in one of our biggest arguments on First Joker, and he was 100% in the right. And I was embarrassed because I was pushing too hard.
Mm. For
And
something that you wanted.
for something that we had talked about and we were going to do. And in the end, it wasn't even something, it was probably just high stress but it was a change, which we were doing all the time and I'm cool with. But something about it made me want to dig in because he's just like, we're not doing this. We're going to go right to this and we're not going to do the thing we talked about.
Mm.
We're going to do this instead.
Okay.
And instead of just going, great, and then just reframing, I was like, but no. I think because I was like, that sounds terrible in my head. And so I resisted. And at some point he just said, yeah, just do it because I'm the fucking director. And I was like, yeah, you're right.
You're right.
You're absolutely right.
Mm.
And even though we'd been working together for 12 years and we had this shorthand and all this sort of thing, and I was, as close as any creative participant to him, I stepped over the line and also like I just, I was in the wrong, quite frankly. And the scene was better for it.
Sure.
And I let it go and I moved on. But it was like, I remember very simply going, God, how did I get to the place where he was forced to say that out loud? That should have been obvious to me from the start. But again, it's cumulative from like all our working experience and all the times I fought and got him to sort of
Right.
adjust. And he wants me to fight to a certain place, and then he wants me to acquiesce and we just have to find that equilibrium, right? And then you do that with a new director you haven't worked with for 10 years and you realize, oh my God, it's like, it is the biggest part of the job.
Yeah.
And it happens on every movie.
Because you could push back and prep, and that's one thing when stress isn't, you have all the time in the world, but when you're on set and you push back, you really get to learn about that person then.
Absolutely. And you might just go, I got to eat this right now. And then maybe when we're driving back to the parking lot, or maybe I call him up that night, her up, whoever you're working with, and say, hey, let's just talk about this. So I get it. We were stressed and all this, but how can we move tomorrow to try to still execute some of these ideas or whatever? Like come to them
Right.
in a way that you're just going, I'm going to do whatever we need to get through these days and shoot. But let's also figure out if we can also execute something that we desire to do, as opposed to throwing it all away in
Sure.
service of like time or, like how can we win? How can we win on both fronts?
Right.
Because then you're just trying to find a path to a solution. And they also know you're fighting to make this better.
Absolutely.
Right? Because if everyone just takes the path of least resistance,
A pushover, essentially.
yep, or they just go, fine, it's your movie. It's
Right.
like, fuck that. It's our movie.
Right.
I care as much as you do. And they want you to care as much as they do. That's why you're there. They want a bunch of people that care deeply about the movie. It's just you need to have somebody at the top
Yeah.
that basically goes, great, I've taken all the suggestions and here's the direction we're going, and everyone move in that same direction.
Seems like it's important to understand that there's always going to be some sort of conflict when you pitch ideas or when you want to receive ideas from somebody. But it's just knowing that you have to know that your ideas might not be the answer all the time, but there's always going to be a potential conflict. You just have to be vulnerable enough to understand that, you might have made a mistake at a certain point, or your idea just isn't what it's supposed to be right now. It's not going to work.
And not take it personally, not just go, it's your movie.
Right.
Like your movie, that attitude of like, it's your movie.
Like dismissive.
Is like giving up. It's like, it's one of the most destructive things you can ever say, even if you say it inside your head, right? Like truly.
It almost feels like then you don't care anymore.
You've just said, you tell me what to do.
Right.
And I'm just going to be a robot.
Similar to when you talk to the director, you're also in a leadership position where you have people under you that come to you for ideas, or they want to bring ideas to you. Where do you stand in terms of having an open collaborative set versus your predetermined ideas going into it, and having the ability to say no to your crew members and saying yes?
Yeah.
Like that balance I find is really interesting as well.
I think the best thing, because I think, and also a learning curve as far as going, like early days, I was so prep heavy that I could basically just give a schematic and say, put a 10K here, put a 5K here, put these, and I could micromanage the whole thing.
Very
and I
specific.
did often. Yeah, because I was trying to be really prepared and all that. Now I go into a more, like a bigger idea of, here's the bigger idea. This is what I want it to feel like. This is what I want it to look like. And then empower them to sort of take over and execute that idea, right? Because everybody wants their own sense of autonomy and ability to sort of make decisions, and then they can run their crew to sort of do that.
I feel like they have a creative voice in the film as well.
Absolutely. And then also there are plenty of things on every movie in which it's like, this is what I want it to look like. Here's ways I've done it before, but shit, you got any new ways? Because I don't want to just keep going back to the well, or I don't know what we should do. Please help me. Right?
That's like the mentality of wanting to push yourself to try new things and not just result back to what you've done every time before.
When we're at limited time, all the things that we have during the making of anything, going back to the well it's going to work, right? You know it's going to work. And sometimes you do have to go back to the well. And then it's like, but what you said is correct. You want to sort of challenge yourself and constantly find, and that has to happen out of real intent, because it doesn't happen accidentally.
Right.
And you'll see it happened with me. It happens all the time where I'm like, okay, I've done that. I know it'll work. Today, I'm going to go back to that. But tomorrow, let's try something new.
Sure.
And if you keep going back to the well, it's going to be a pretty boring job, and you wouldn't have pushed yourself. And at the end of the day, even if everyone's happy, you're going to feel like a little bit let down.
Right.
And I feel like every job, I want to learn something. I want to take some chances that make me feel a little scared, and all those kind of things. And I think those are the jobs that you feel really great about.
How do you approach the conversation with like your gaffer, your key grip, when they present an idea that you don't think is the right decision?
And lately, I just try to say, here's why I don't want to go in that direction. And I'll just explain it to them. I try to be very straightforward so that we're not wasting time.
Right.
In the same way as I would want a director to, right? And go, or I might say, let me think about it and then revisit. Or if I'm skeptical of it, I might say, okay, explain to me why that's going to be more effective than, let's say, this idea.
Sure.
Right? And that's always really helpful too, because I'll go, oh, great. Actually, I see that, and that's good. Let's go in that direction, right? And I'll just ask questions.
Because you want to make, even when you say no and you turn down their idea, you still want to present it in a way that makes them feel like they can keep coming back to you with more ideas.
Absolutely. I mean, you could take any scenario, right? Like in the new Joker, right? And I don't know why this one came to my head, but it's like involves big equipment, right? Which is there's like a yard that the inmates hang out in, right?
Yeah.
And it's separated by a fence, and on one side is B ward, and then the other side is like their, like criminal ward. And we did it downtown LA, not far from here, in sort of like a parking area, kind of. And so we could exploit 1.5 walls that were real, and then production design put up the rest of the walls to sort of marry it together. And those walls had to go up 20 feet, let's say, right? And then from there, for some shots, maybe in the movie there's 6 shots, set extension. And then also on that scene with the umbrellas, they walk outside,
Right.
we need it to be raining. Okay, so what do you do when you start attacking that location? You're like, okay, where are we going to place that hero wall in relation to the sun? When is the sun in a good place and when is it in a shitty place, right? Because we're going to shoot that scene maybe over 3 hours. The sun's going to move a lot. Are we going to chase the sun with the camera and put everyone in backlight? Or should we just take the sun out, right? And so there's a situation where it's like, well, we need to take the sun out for the rain anyway. So the same equipment that's going to help take the sun out for the rain will also help us in the non-rain scenes if we want it. So then it comes to like, okay, what's the machinery there? Because probably the line producer, even on a movie like that, doesn't know what we're going to need.
Right.
Like big, 60 by or 260 bys or some fly swatters and a 60 by. These are things that need a construction crane, right? And that's a big piece of equipment. And where does it sit? And, and how does it move? And if it moves, how long does it take to move? And all the sort of things. So you just constantly are running through plan A, B, C, right?
Exactly.
What happens if the wind comes up and they make you take it down? What do we
Right.
do then, right? That's always, so it's like, here's a plan, go to the key grip and his rigging team and say, what's the best solution for this? What's the best piece of equipment? Here's what I want, right? I want it to knock out the sun here, let a little sun through here. When we move to rain, we might move to it on the same day. So how long is it going to take?
Sure.
What's the solution that's going to make it the fastest, right? And then we just go through all the scenarios. What happens if and then the VFX department goes, we need blue above the set extension. Okay, is that art department? Is that us? Is it painted? Is it rags? It's like all these things. And you just keep going through. And in each one of these situations, you're going to talk to 3 departments and you're going to ask them what's the best solution. Then it's going to get budgeted and then they'll say we don't have the money. And then you find a new solution and you just keep doing this all day long.
Right.
And that's one set of 40 that you're going to think about through prep 20 times, right? And it's going to keep getting sort of worked around. And that's just one of 40. And that just happens on every single thing. And hence, even talking about it, it's why every day in prep is stressful. Because you're going through every one of those things. But you need these really experienced people to, one, take that work off your plate in the same way as a DP, you're taking work off the director's plate. Like everybody wants somebody who's going to make their job easier.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
For sure.
So just think of that, right? So you want to hire people that are going to make your job easier, and they're going to hire people that are make their job easier. It's just like, it's not passing the buck. It's just making the whole system more efficient, right?
Right.
As opposed to people doing redundancies or like, not being a self-starter enough that you have to constantly tell them what to do. If you have to tell somebody what to do for everything of their job,
That's a problem.
it's a real problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you should think of yourself as a DP in the same light.
I agree.
Like if the director gave me no information, sure, you could be like, I don't even know what the fuck to do. No, just do what you think is right. And they'll tell you if it's right or not, right? Like if you have nothing, doesn't mean you don't do anything. You do what you think is going to be the best thing for the scene and prepare for it, right? Based on the script, based on whatever information you have. But don't just wait for somebody to tell you what to do. That's going to make you, disposable. And
100%
feel like
disposable.
they go, oh my God, I got to tell them everything. Like, as
Right.
opposed to somebody who they're like, man, this person just
They get it.
get stuff done,
Yeah.
and they make my life easier.
Right.
You
On
know?
that note, with your, I guess, gaffer in particular, key grip maybe as well, what are your expectations of your relationship with your gaffer on a movie like Joker, for example? Like, do you expect them to have the same understanding of the story as you? Like, where do you kind of want that relationship with the gaffer? Where do you hope they are mentally going onto a project?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with so many great gaffers in my life. Dave Irwin,
Hmm.
Jared Waldron, Rafi Sanchez, who did Joker and Black Adam with me. And to a person, they're all people who care about the script and are self-starters, right? They're the people who are going to come up with a plan and take whatever information you gave them and then also plan all these things you never even thought about,
Right.
right? They're the ones who are going to sort of say, I get it. I know what you want. Let's take this scene. Here's what I want to I give them the big stroke creative ideas and say, oh yeah, I like this unit. We test some things and go, that feels right. So I might give them some guidance on technical stuff, but then they just go crazy.
Mm.
And in the case of, let's say, Joker and, the dimmer board operator, lighting designer, Brian Booth, works hand in hand with Rafi to
Sure.
then create the plans and do the overheads and put units in there so that also when the budget comes back, they've already done all this work, putting all these units in, and then we can have discussions of like, okay, can we kill 20% of the sky panels, and do we need this, and then we go through it like, okay, we have it here for this reason, okay, keep it. That's a compromise I don't want to make, or
Right.
we could probably lose this. And if I had to sit there and draw all that out like I did when I was doing small movies,
Hmm.
it would crush me. I wouldn't have the time. And so that they're incredibly creative people, but they're also like, they just take so much like of your stress
Right.
away, and
Absolutely.
they're just incredible. You couldn't make it without them. And the crew I had on Joker, the new Joker Folie Do, is like the best bar none I've ever had in my life.
I love that.
Yeah, and it made the movie super smooth.
When I first started my career as a DP, I don't know if it was the maybe fear or lack of confidence in my ability when hiring a gaffer or key grip. I was always afraid to hire people that were better than me or people that I
Right.
like inspire, like gaffers that I would love to work with in the beginning because I felt like I wasn't adequate. And I would always hire people that were at the same level or below. And I always felt like I wasn't progressing.
Yeah, I
But then
get
one
that.
day I decided to just hire that one gaffer that I've been looking at for a year or two
Yeah.
years. And it completely changed my life. They brought a whole new element of something that I felt like I was just missing about my work and my ability to kind of have a team that was there for a specific goal and do it really, really well.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think if I did that in any way early days. But yeah, then you start to realize you want everybody who's the greatest expert
Yeah.
possible.
Hmm.
Just
Same
like
with
a director.
ACs.
A
Yeah.
director wants the same thing, right? They want somebody who knows more than them and can provide all these sort of skills that they don't have. So yeah, definitely get the best person available and
Right.
get the person who really one you vibe with, right? That also it could be somebody who's amazing, but you don't have a vibe with, and that's not going to work out either. But yeah, you make the movie with 20 people, 50
Hmm.
people, whatever the size of the movie, 100 people, and thus that's the reason the movie succeeds.
Right.
Yeah, it's not just from you or the director or anybody
It's a team.
individually. It really is in a massive way.
Yeah. So Joker Folie Dude came out. It looks insane. I remember seeing it in IMAX and like visually, I was just smiling. It was one of the most beautiful films I've seen in a really long time.
Thank
Like
you.
really stunning work in that. And it made me think about just the experiences I've had working on short films and the one feature that I did where it seemed that the cinematography when talking with the director was always a background character in the films. But in Joker, it's a very prominent character, like the beauty of it, the lighting, the movement of light, the colors. How do you find the balance of making cinematography a character in the film without overdoing it, but still making
Sure.
it fit in the story, but not being a background character, really?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, of course, I don't want cinematography to be
The focal point.
the focal point, or even sort of the thing that sort of takes you out of the movie, right? That you're sort of thinking about the camera movement and the shots and all that. This movie, because it has some musical elements, it has some fantasy elements, by their nature, then the cinematography and the lighting can be much more expressionistic and be an emotion in the scene as well, right? And that can come in the form of camera movement. It can come in the form of where the lights come on to reveal things. And so it was a natural place in which the lighting could be basically like another character.
Right.
And so this movie just presented that as an opportunity. And then also there are subtle ways. You hope they're more subtle than overt, of course, but where you want the lighting, and this is in every movie, Joker, or all the movies I do, to help enhance the emotion of the scene, right? And that can come in forms of color. It can come in the density and the contrast. It can come in shadows, all kinds of ways in which you hope you can do it in ways that are felt more than they're seen,
Right.
even though obviously it's a visual part of the movie.
And I think something that I love about the visuals in this movie was, as stunning as they were, they just felt very real. Like, you tend to light in color and in style that is directly related to the location that you're shooting. Like, it doesn't feel out of place. And I just find that to be really amazing that you could do that within the space and still make it look visually like, wow, this is really beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I try always to start with the location and the set and say, like, what would be where the light's actually coming from, and really drive it almost fundamentally from there, right? So the courtroom's a big set in the movie. Arkham is a big set in the movie. They're really being driven by the windows and the fluorescence and the practicals almost exclusively. And so everything we do is in service of, like, okay, that reality. And then we can make subtle choices. Like, when they have movie night, inherently you can have a little bit of color variation because, well, what's outside those windows in that Arkham kind of exterior? Well, they're probably 1981, 82. They're still sodium vapor. So that's that kind of orange, warm light that would be outside as like the architectural lighting of the building, lights over wall. So outside those windows, that then provides a color. A movie theater, and a movie projector is inherently a colder bulb, right? Even back in the 80s, that bulb that is going through that 16mm projector would be cooler, right? So that color contrast already sort of defines some things. And then what would be the amount of bounce off that screen that's lighting their faces, and that's going to be their light, and how do we execute that, right? So you just start picking away and then you talk to the art department. In the case of Joker, we had that amazing blessing of shooting in Los Angeles, which is so rare, but you talk about work-life balance and you talk about like priorities and what brings you joy. Shooting in LA is incredible. And
Were you able to go home at night?
home at night, it was like the best experience in a way that movies used to be done, which is Todd likes to work really efficiently and fast. Joaquin and Gaga and everyone who's making the movie, we don't shoot a ton of takes, and we want to shoot really reasonable days. So all of our days were 10 hours.
Wow.
Every single day was an 8 a.m. call time, and every single day we were out of the doors of the stage no later than 6. So it was the closest thing to having like a normal job, but still within those 10 hours of shooting, we pushed ourselves every day to do everything. That was never compromised. But the idea that Warner Brothers and the studio allowed us to shoot in Los Angeles, which is rare, really rare, and it's a bummer.
Why is it so rare?
Tax incentives.
Taxes, yeah.
The tax incentives that this movie got were far less. They could have made the movie cheaper. In
Jersey's
in London,
really
New
popular
York.
now.
We shot the first one in New York. There are plenty of reasons to skip town and go make movies elsewhere, and we do it every single day. And that's why I've spent 6 of 8 years in Atlanta, and I've shot in New York 3 times. And listen, they're great, but when you talk about some of the stuff that makes doing this job really hard, it's being away from your family. And 25 years ago and greater, That's why LA is the home of the movie
Right.
business, right? Is you shot here.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'm so happy and grateful that we shot the movie in Los Angeles, and that even if it made the movie slightly more expensive than if we shot elsewhere, it made such a difference to people's lives, like real difference, right? To my family's life and to my kids' life. And so, and because of the style of which Todd has always shot from our entire career of 15 years, it's efficient. And so it's not these like grueling long days which are unhealthy for people. So
I'm in those right now.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And because of that, we had a lot of stages and sets. And so because we have stages and sets, it allows flexibility
Of
for where
course.
we put those windows. So suddenly you can have these like long conversations with the production designer, Mark Friedberg, and really define where those windows want to be.
Right.
And that's great because now you can work basically the sets in a 3 to 60 degree environmental lighting because you've built the sets to allow for that.
Right.
And so we had the benefit of that. And then yes, of course, scenes in which there's fantasy and we're transforming those sets in a different way, we can now bring in lighting that's not motivated just from those sources. Yeah.
Right. And as predetermined as a lot of this sounds and as much prep goes in, I think something that I love at the indie level that I'm shooting at is the accessibility to spontaneity and be able to change things on a dime, essentially. When I'm working with a small crew, there's, only maybe 20 people on set, where Joker, Black Adam, there's hundreds.
Yeah.
How do you find the balance of wanting to be spontaneous when you know that there is so many moving parts when you want to change one thing?
I mean, we've worked so hard to make everything spontaneous,
On Joker in particular?
We've
Or-
started working on it forever. It's probably the biggest thing Todd and I talk about, right? But it's not just Todd and I. I remember when I talked to Gareth Edwards, and if you look at like what Gareth did with the creator, it was like a function of Monsters, which he basically did with a very small crew. And he did the VFX himself, and he operated, and he did all these things. And Gareth's an incredible filmmaker. And then going on to Godzilla, 2014's Godzilla that Seamus McGarvey did, and it has nothing to do with Seamus. It has to do with the machinery and the fact of like how big the machinery gets when you go make a movie that size. And I just remember, because I did some reshoots on that movie, or not reshoots, but just some additional stuff that they added, matching Seamus's stuff, of course, was I remember him saying, I just want as much flexibility as possible. Like I just want to be able to spin around and shoot wherever I can see. And so my whole objective in that time was to sort of help in whatever way I could to give him that freedom. And sometimes it wasn't available. But if you look at what he did in The Creator, it was like him constantly trying to give himself this kind of freedom, even on a big science fiction movie, to turn around and shoot wherever he wants to shoot. Right. And I think that methodology has always been present in Todd's philosophy. It's become even more present through Joker and Joker Folie à Deux. So I think almost every filmmaker I know wants that kind of flexibility, right?
Absolutely.
And the idea that even if there's 200 people, which sometimes just feels like too many people, but they all have a purpose, really you're making the movie with 8 people around the camera, generally speaking, right? And there's a lot of stuff that got you there, right? And that's the other 100 and whatever it is, some odd people. And so that desire to be flexible, I think, is even more important when you get to a bigger movie, right? And so that doesn't change. That's the same indie spirit, just now translating to a bigger size movie. So Joker and the new Joker, man, all of it was about that flexibility.
Right.
It was about like, how much time can the actors have shooting in this 10 hours? And for us, it was like, well, let's give them 9 hours, right? So let's say whatever it takes to switch a lens is the time we're going to make an adjustment in lighting, right? So no lighting setup change would happen greater than 10 minutes, no matter what it was. If we had something bigger than that and we had to, let's say, pull a wall to go to a new spot, we would do that over lunch. Right?
I see.
And so we would pick a spot and go, here, let's save this 30-minute thing that has to happen to take a wall out and move some equipment around. And we'll do that over lunch so that nobody's losing time.
So that's really important to talk about, like the schedule, working with the different departments, your AD, to figure out how to work the schedule that's conducive for not only you as the DP, the production designer, but actors as well.
It's probably, the most important relationship I have on a set.
The AD?
Yeah, because First, and it's really a coordination between the director, myself, and the AD, because of course I have needs, and those needs might be where the sun is on a day exterior, this and that. But all those things can save time. So if the actors have a inflexibility for whatever reason, makeup or they're not available or whatever those things up, and that can determine something. Well, if that means that suddenly you're shooting a day exterior in the middle of the day, but it wants to feel like sunset, you've now caused financial things, right? Like, okay, now I have to take out the sun and light underneath it to create sunset. If we could do this at 5 p.m., we could shoot for 2 hours in the right light, and we've saved all this stuff and time, which is money. So now, can all those things always work out? Not necessarily, but when they do, and with Todd, he's really, receptive to this, and David Webb, who's the best AD in the world, combination of the three of us, all wanting this to happen and make it as efficient. So for Todd, he's like, great, I'd rather shoot over 2 dusks because 1, it's going to save money because we don't need this equipment, but 2, it's going to look right, and 3, it's like, we'll shoot in less time. All those things means he's going to go for the thing that's right for everybody, right? It makes the movie look better, it makes the timing, it saves money, all that stuff. When those things are working together, everybody wins, right?
Yep.
And then you just have to also, of course, have everyone on board, right? Including the actors and their schedule and when they're available and how much time it takes to get them right. Because the actors can drive a lot of things, right?
Yeah, for sure.
They can drive most things on a movie set, right? And probably fundamentally the way that I think the movie business has shifted in 50 years is that, and this is, by the way, agents need to take this into account as well, right? It's like, because sometimes they unknowingly can do a disservice to movie making, right? I won't name names, but I'll give you an example. There's a friend of mine who's an actor who did a movie. And I remember I knew the movie because I actually read it to possibly direct as well. And so I was really familiar with the movie and I knew what character he played. And the character he played was basically all throughout the movie. So let's say the movie shot for 8 weeks. Normally, he would be there for all 8 weeks because it's like they'd shoot in this order. He'd be down for 3 or 4 days at a time, but he'd be available for all 8 weeks because that's how the schedule would work. And his agent, I remember seeing his agent, and she said, "Oh my God, it's like, he's going to do this movie." I was like, "Oh, great, that's a cool part." And she's like, "Oh, it's great. I got him he only has to be there for 2 weeks." And I just remember going, wow, yeah, I know you think you helped him because now he only has to be there for 2 weeks.
Of course.
And maybe his salary for 2 weeks is like, great. He's got 50 grand a week instead of whatever it is, 15 grand for 8 weeks or whatever the numbers are. The net pay he's going to get is the net pay he's going to get. But now he only has to be there for 2 weeks.
Of course.
And all I could think is he probably would be fine being there for 8 weeks. And you thought you were doing him a service and you just fucked up this whole production. And you have no idea. This production, because they want him to be in the movie, is now doing backflips to
try to accommodate.
Reschedule everything to put all his work in 2 weeks. And I just thought, what a fuck job you did to this movie and that director. And they're probably going to do that crazy thing and move the schedule around. And now the DP and the director are scrambling to figure out how to do all their work in 2 weeks because he has value to the production.
Of course.
And you think you're a hero, but you're actually the villain in this story, right? And it's like, and that I think fundamentally, it's like we're all in this together. And I think one of the reasons movies have gotten more expensive and all that is like when all those parts are working independently to service their own person. So if the agent's just trying to service that actor in contrast to the movie's needs, suddenly you go, okay, so let's add another unit. Because now while we're doing this, it's like suddenly you've added more crew. You've shrunk the schedule. You've done all this, right? It's like movies used to be for 90 days. Like small movies used to shoot for 90 days. Well, they shot for 90 days because the actors were available for 90 days. When suddenly you say the actor is only available for 3 weeks, then those same movies that were 90 days became 45 days. And they added 3 crews and they added this. It's like the movies didn't get cheaper. They got shorter, worse, and people started, it's like all of it is connected,
Yeah.
right? And I think the business of movie making, it's we're all doing it together. Now, listen, we don't live in the time in which actors were owned by the studios, and they could own them for 100 days and make them do whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
I get that. That wasn't cool either. But that agent story always stuck with me because I just remember, wow, I know you think you did your client a service, but
In service of the movie.
you just serviced him, and
Right.
you really didn't understand how the ramifications of what that just did to that production.
Right.
Yeah.
In terms of actors, when I've done some narrative projects, I've built my own relationship with the actors, separate from the director, where they sometimes, maybe this is just the experience that I have, they kind of look at, if you're operating the camera, they'll do a take, maybe the director's in the other room, they'll kind of look at you after the director yells cut and for like
Sure.
for like, was this
how'd it
good?
go?
How'd it
Yeah,
go?
yeah, exactly.
So I'm curious at your level, working with Joaquin, working with Lady Gaga, do you have that similar relationship as like an indie level where you have a personal connection with them on set?
I think so. I think it all comes down to movie by movie, show by show, like the relationship and where the actor wants to be in that thing. Like if an actor wants to be totally in their space
Yeah.
and not want to break it, I'm not even going to engage. If they're really sort of, talkative and they like to like chat in between takes, so be it as well. I think no matter what, they're really vulnerable when they act, no matter what they are, and even if they're as good as Joaquin. And so if they do want to engage and they sort of catch your eye, they're looking for something. And if that something is like, I felt that, who wouldn't want to feel that? It's
Right.
like saying, yeah, that was awesome. And that's going to, so if you're the operator, you're the assistant, you're there, sitting there near them. I mean, everyone is super vulnerable doing something creative. And the more I've learned is like the best actors in the world are still human beings that are also like trying things for the first time
Yeah.
and are really scared,
Yeah.
right? And that's good because you want them to be scared because it means they care, and it also means they're trying something new. But yeah, we're all in the same boat, and so in the same way, like Joaquin has spent his whole life on movie sets, and so he's been an actor from a child, and so this is his sort of work family, right? Our movie sets and the people that make movies, and so he's as comfortable there as anywhere, and so he wants to be engaging.
On a personal level, just like watching Joker for the first time and like seeing Joaquin, it is insane for me to be able to think about the experience, what it would be like to be on that set watching that for the first time. And I read something that you said, it's as if I'm watching somebody on another planet. Like Joaquin is his own person, but then when he plays his character of Joker and Arthur, and seeing what we saw in the theaters, but you seeing it in real life, how do you emotionally kind of react to that? Because it has to be an intense feeling seeing him go through that type of performance.
I mean, to me, it was like watching a great athlete or watching anything live, right? Where like we were talking about the Yankees or something,
Right.
where you're just like, you watch Soto and he's like really locked in and you're leaning forward because you're like, oh man, he's fouled off 3 in a row, but he keeps shaking his head and looking at the pitcher like this guy's going yard for the next pitch if he gets it. And you're just waiting. And so that lean in quality is what Joaquin gives you. And Gaga and anybody. I just worked with Christian Bale and Jesse Buckley, and they had that same quality as well as Bradley Cooper. I mean, I could go on and on. It's that lean in thing where they're super present. It makes you really present. Suddenly everything disappears. And you're watching something happen in real time that is unique to this moment. It's not going to happen again. And so you hope everyone's dialed in, so you capture it. But yeah, it's super fun and exciting.
Actually,
It's exciting. That's why I was like, oh, right. As opposed to, the sort of mechanics of filmmaking where it's like, we got that line, let's move on, let's get this line. And suddenly you're like, oh, I can see how it's going to piece together, but it feels, independent
Right.
that you're going to weave it together with an edit. Here, it's like, oh, I never want to cut and I just want to sit here. And each take, you're like, go back and watch dailies, and you're like, oh, I could sustain the whole take on this shot. And and everything that's happening can be off camera.
Right.
Because I'm disengaged. And that's when it's amazing.
That to me is like the specific example of joy I feel on set is when I'm like operating a camera, I'm watching a monitor and I'm just subconsciously smiling.
Yeah.
Whereas everything aligns, the performance, the lighting, the camera movement, everything.
Yeah.
And I just smile. It's literally the best feeling in the world to me.
That happens so much that I remember even on set, but also watching dailies. Let's say we do 4 or 5 setups, right, for a scene. It could be a long scene. And each setup, we sort of always shoot 2 cameras. And invariably, I'll shoot a setup and I'll go, that I could see that only being on this shot. And then we'll switch to something totally different. And I'll be like, well, it could all be in this shot. It could be on, and each shot feels like it could sustain its own 3-minute scene by itself. And then you're like, wow, this is going to be really interesting to see it cut, because each one of these shots is sustaining my effort fully. I mean, my attention really fully. So yeah, that happens all the time. And when that's happening, you're feeling really like, okay, this thing's working.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. And I guess when you have a moment or like a shot, for example, or a scene where you are smiling, like you love it, it's perfect in your head, and you see the edit or the cut and it's not there. How do you kind of like?
That's a good question.
I felt that too. Where I was like, oh man, I really wish that was in there. Like,
listen, it's not my job to edit.
It's not your film technically, like in the terms of ownership. Like the director.
Yeah, it happens sometimes. Or like, oh, how did they not use that shot? Like that happens. That happens a fair amount, But you recognize that one, the editor, and is more talented at their job than I am at their job, way more, right? And so,
but they also don't have the emotional attachment that you do.
That's
to
true,
a shot.
and that helps sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes they just miss a shot, right? I've heard this. Like sometimes you'll see marketing will take the whole dailies, right? Like marketing on big movies, they'll have access to the whole movie.
Wow.
And sometimes this happens fairly often. It's like they'll use a shot that I'm like, right, they saw that shot that I saw, but the editor somehow missed it. And then sometimes, if you still have time, the editor might go, yeah, how did we miss that shot, right? And it's like, so it happens. It's like there's a lot of stuff. And when you go down a path as an editor, or you go down a path as a director in the editing, you're locked into a certain sort of structure of what you're looking for. And so a shot that might have worked great all by itself, right? I remember on the first Joker, when he gets fired, right? We always had planned on this 2-camera setup. There was going to be a close-up on a longer lens, like 100 mil, sort of head to toe on a stick of dolly track of him getting fired. Then we had a Technocrane that was like wide that you could see the bridge and you could see it in space. And that camera moved all the way in. And that camera moved from a really wide shot, really slowly, because it took like, I don't know, minute and a half for him to get fired, all the way underneath to the shot where he bangs his head and breaks the glass.
Right.
When we shot that shot, and it was at dusk, it was only 2 takes. I'm like, that's the scene. That's it right there. That 8-camera shot is the scene. Never was in any cut, not one. They never even tried it.
Wow.
Now I never even brought it up, except to kind of be like, how did you not try that? But I also respect Todd as an editor as much as I respect him as anything. He's incredible. And he always makes the decision that's right. And he's also incredible at doing things that a lot of directors struggle with, which is to use wide shots and show geography and really give you a sense of space. He's better than anyone I've ever seen at that. So I can't be mad at one shot when he does the 99.999% other things that I'm like, you found incredible magic here. So I just eat it. And then just go, well, yeah, it's not my job.
So I want to do one thing I mentioned to you before about going through some of these shots. So for the people that are just listening, if you want to follow along visually, if you go to YouTube, I'm going to put a little visual on the side of Lawrence here, or Larry, kind of drawing over some stills and explaining how he accomplished some of these shots, whether it's about lighting, compositionally, how he worked with the production designer, talent, location to be able to accomplish some of these moments.
Give it a shot.
All right, let's do it.
Let's go. So the first thing in here, so this one shot where he kind of leans back into the reds. If we turned off all the lights in the space, and if you start at the beginning of this scene, 2 spotlights come on her on the piano, one on him smoking next to the piano as it begins. We used LEDs because we could really control color and that kind of thing. There are these BMFL, follow spot LTs.
That's what you use for the spotlights?
Yeah. And so we'd put like a handful of these in there, but also the spotlight that's lighting him from the front is just a Super Trooper follow spot, the same as we used in like Murray Franklin show, old school Super Trooper. The ones that were in the ceiling, like that's basically being represented here, that one would be one of these sort of robies, and even some of the stuff back in the distance, you know, here and here. But when he's then like, we turn off other people at some point and just give him a spotlight, those would be the Super Troopers. And then in the background here, one of the things here was what we wanted to do. There's some practicals on the wall, like these 2 right ones here are some practicals built into the set, basically shooting over the crowd in the foreground. It's basically a 3-wall set.
Right.
And one wall has some stuff, but it's basically just blackout, velvet blackout. So everything just goes into blackness.
And velvet's particular. You chose velvet for a particular reason?
Velvet is non-reflective. If we did that, let's say with Duvetine, you would see it.
I see.
Yeah. So the velvet just takes out any reflection. So if you want to like shoot somebody in a black void, velvet will do it much better. And so in here, anywhere we needed black that wasn't seen, you know, just to extend the sense of void or the set, we would use velvet. Even these par trees down here, you know, in the background here, just like parkan trees, right? And they were a combination of a couple LED parkans and old school parkans with gels. I think in that par tree, because we knew we'd be photographing them and we wanted their sort of decay to feel real, the ones that were photographed, we wanted to be old school parkans that we just put different colored gels. When we shot down the side, like this shot sees, that those things also were just on like a real-time dimmer. Everything's real time. So we're calling out cues, but also our dimmer board operator or Rafi to the music is like pushing those parkans. So if you see it in the movie, you'll see they're not programmed to the song. Everything we wanted full flexibility. So when we were in a different angle, depending on what we were seeing, we could then flash it, right? And so it was all done in real time. So these little par trees that were on the sides, and then the practicals, which are over here on the right, those practicals are just part of the set dressing. We would preset spotlights. So let's say we had 2 Super Troopers at the front that were hand operated. That was one for Gaga, one for Joaquin. Then we had these other spotlights that they could be backlit spotlights that we would turn on depending on where the camera was and depending on where we were in the song. And so what you see here is a bunch of those on doing different things.
And then when you would flip the camera on the other side, you turn those off and then backlit from behind.
That's exactly right. And instead of like, give us an hour, we'll turn the set around, we pre-placed everything so that there was never an hour. And also it meant I could put another camera on that side. And sometimes the front light looked good, or that front light wasn't great, and maybe they'd use it, maybe they wouldn't. But when we used the backlight on the other shot, this side's camera front light looked shitty, but the other camera now looked good. So this kind of scene we shot with 3 cameras. One was on a 45-foot Scorpio with a matrix head. The other one was on a dolly track going across the middle. And then the third camera was usually on a longer lens, a zoom, that could pick off like the trumpet player and and a lot of little pieces. The reason why we just would bring in a third camera and is because we didn't want to sort of now go, let's shoot the band. You know, sometimes we would do that because we would be like just still waiting for makeup, let's say, and we go, okay, we have an opportunity. We could shoot one shot of the trumpet. But then it always felt so specific. And we wanted everything to feel like it was sort of captured in real time, like a live performance. And so it was better to do it when other things were happening with the A and B camera.
Got it.
And so it was nicer to try to find those moments in real time because they had that kind of verisimilitude and capture that we wanted. All right, so like these prison movies, you think about a movie like Sullivan's Travels or something, right? Which is a cool movie. Or Shawshank, or I don't know if Shawshank does it. I think Green Mile does it. It's a bit of a trope in prison movies that they get, a night to watch movies. And so in this, because it's the B ward, which is like, not, aggressive criminals. These are more just people who are, are psychologically,
Right.
sort of damaged, but they're not, dangerous to society. They get a movie night that he's invited into. So it's a bit of like their first date. They've met, they've sort of talked in the hallway. This is now like going to a movie night, right? Like it's a movie date. And so for me, this was always wanted to be a very magical moment. And one thing, just from a logistical standpoint, was in early prep, there's just, you go into technical things like, okay, they brought in a 16 millimeter projector. Todd didn't want it to be 35. It's too ridiculous. It's too big. So they would have had a 16 millimeter print of The Bandwagon, which is the movie that's playing on the screen. And they've rolled it in on a cart like you would in a high school or something. And that's what they're showing these inmates on like a little pull down screen. So very simple. So we got a 16 millimeter print of The Bandwagon, and then we tested that on 16. And what we realized really early on is, yeah, it worked and it looked okay, but it wasn't super vibrant as an image.
Right.
And the reset time to like roll it back and also to find a specific, let's say, moment in the song to start on, any of those kind of logistics became like very quickly we realized that's going to take too much time. But we wanted to see the projector with film around it. So basically we created a reel-to-reel that was faked, so it looked like 16 was rolling through that projector. And then we hid a digital projector with Bandwagon on it that we treated, because we had already shot some footage and tests of the 16 millimeter print. So we saw how much gate weave there was.
Sure.
We saw a couple scratches and dirt. So we used that as a guide, took like a digital print of Bandwagon and then treated it to look that way. And then we basically took a mirror, hid the projector in that little cart, cut a hole in it, cut a hole in the projector, shot it through a mirror, and so that could come out the front.
Oh,
so
man.
you could see the projector, it's the opening shot of the scene as you go past it. So you could see the reel-to-reel with 16, but there's a hidden digital print inside of it, and a digital projector. So that we had the control, we had control brightness, we could make it a bit more of a vibrant image, because for like a big wide shot, there's not a lot left to be, like we want that projected image to basically be bouncing back on the actors, to be the light that they're seeing. Now we hid above them really, really, really simple, almost like asterotubes that were like low level that could mimic it, and they were just off the frame line to kind of enhance the sort of push back from the screen.
Push to come from the screen.
Yeah. And so that way that provided it for like the wide shot. Okay. So when we were testing that projector, we thought at a point that we would like basically take the same frame that you see here, but imagine the projector we were shooting from behind the screen that was hanging in the ceiling. So once we tested the projector, I took the camera and I was rolling it around on the dolly, and the two stand-ins were standing there. And as we rolled it around, we before we put this magic cloth that we were going to test for the thing, the two actors just fell into this like atmospheric smoke of just the projector light, and it bloomed out like this kind of magical thing, and the way it flared. And I was like, oh, took a still
like a happy
of that.
accident.
Happy accident that I was like, yeah, we're going to do that for sure.
Love that.
So then that became the foundation for this moment in the movie. So what we're doing here is it's the real projector, the digital projector. And we played with like, can that image be black and white? Because this color, this sort of blue that's coming out here, this cyan, that's just, 5600 on the projector. But we could play with that projector and control it a little bit. We looked at it with black and white. We looked at it like with the 16 millimeter projector. This was still the best result of it. And then, of course, she's lit the whole piano back here on fire. I'll do it with black, maybe. This whole piano has been lit on fire. And in a practical sense, then you go into like, okay, how do we do that?
Right.
Well, first you have to like make sure that entire set wall can't go up in flames. Now, this
legitimately not go up.
Legitimately, yeah. And at some point, so there's a couple elements going on here. One, even in the shot where she throws the matches into the thing, we have a flame bar down there that can come up. Okay. So that's just a gas flame bar, and then there's a gas flame bar behind it. There's a gas flame bar on the floor. There's like probably 4 gas flame bars there. So that for a shot like this, we have real flames
So
coming
practical
up.
flames.
Practical flames,
Right.
which is the best thing for the lighting, best thing for all of that. And then they've enhanced it by one, painting over the flame bars that you see, but also painting on top of it with flames. But instead of just painting it, we saved a section of this wall, a little bigger than what you see here, and we actually lit it on fire outside later as an element.
Oh, wow.
Right.
And then brought it in post?
Yeah. And then that way, it wasn't like they were just creating paint, like fire. We actually took this, went outside, took that set wall. You couldn't do it inside because it would be like so much smoke that you couldn't do it on the stages because then you'd have to clear the stages. It's like obviously a hazardous material. And so then they were able to use the real set, real flames in the real space, real kind of interaction with the wall.
Was that a decision between you, Todd, and the VFX? Like, how did you want to why did you decide to do that rather than strictly just VFX?
Was like, I'd rather just light the set wall on fire than just
VFX.
Total VFX. A lot of that. And even when they escape and they're sort of running away in this sort of flashing emergency lights, and it's in the trailer, and it's like they're holding hands, and in the background, it's basically this room is the background now, and it's now really engulfed in flames. For that on set, we put some flame bars, but we also took some it was that kind of fabric that you can roll out that has LEDs on them, and you could basically pixel map to it.
Sure.
But they were far enough away on the Area 65 that they went out of focus. It looked like fire, but it didn't look like any fire you could use. But it definitely looked enough like fire that because we didn't want to put blue screen back there. So we wanted something that
felt real,
was interacting with the rest of the environment, like the hallway. And so in that shot, they did a similar thing, which is they then took that section of the wall and that hallway, and they took it outside and they lit it on fire as well. So that way, on both these sort of critical shots where we're adding fire later, we did that. And then when they escape, which is right after the scene, they go outside and they go to like their Arkham exterior, they hide behind a car, and then they go and dance, and then they go to the gates. That scene, we hid these same kind of we hid like a bunch of vortexes and other things like that put a fire effect on them out the windows, and it was along with other flame bars, and then they enhanced that. Now, for that, they didn't light that building on fire as an example, but if they could have, they would have.
So what I find interesting here is because you did the test and you found that this particular angle backlit by the projector gives this look, and because the final image has this color contrast, you had to put the piano in that specific spot. So when it lit on fire, the right side of the frame is orange and the left side is blue. Was that a conscious, was that your decision, or is that a combination of multiple people to put it back in that spot?
The thing was the shot that was found by accident was just on an empty stage. So I knew that had this sort of interesting cyan. It was more a function of I love the color contrast, and it speaks to this emotional sort of connection between them of the warmth of her and the coolness of him, and that kind of larger thing, which exists, when he first sees her, she's in warm light and he's still in the blue light of the windows from the rain. So that's a consistent part of it, but it's also a functional thing of the place is on fire.
Exactly.
Right. So putting the camera there allowed it. If you put the camera on the other side, it's a shot that precedes this, none of that exists.
Right.
So I knew that at least this sort of monochromatic aspect of what we tested was now going to have this really beautiful interaction of warm light. But yeah, a lot of it comes from the source of the script and all these other things. Amazing. But of course, I love that this image has those two colors in it. And this is the 58 mil, which is a real hero lens of ours, and it's pushing in on a crane. And just slowly pushing in. And so the combination of them kissing and blocking that projection light, along with the way that the camera can sort of also chase that. So it had the ability to slide a tiny bit left or right to enhance or hide the flare if it was too much.
Right. So right here you see the flare a little bit.
Yeah, and if you see it in real time and you actually see the shot, you'll see that this section here, I'll redraw it in there, where really the projector is in the center.
Right.
It gets, based on how they come together, kiss, and then separate, that also, but it's always nice to give yourself a little control over it as well. So if it's too much and it's too early, you can slide a little right and hide it, and then you can bring it. So I don't never want the actors to feel like
limited in their
oh,
mark.
don't stand here. If you have to stand here to make it perfect. Like if they miss the mark, because we never just did this shot by itself.
Sure.
It happened in real time of them standing up. Like it's not like it's shot. You could imagine just go stand on these marks and we're going to just shoot this shot. No, the shot was part of a larger shot that just continued through here. Right. And so if they missed the mark, we need to have some flexibility to make sure it still had our intention as well.
Amazing. ShotDeck is a business that you started a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And it's a tool that myself and I think every filmmaker imaginable uses at this point. Is it essentially what you thought it would become at this point, or is it more than what you've expected?
I mean, I love how much it's taken off, because that was my hope. Is I created it because I needed it to exist, and with the real idea that if I needed to exist, and talking to some people, that other people would need it too. And I found like Gareth Edwards, for instance, was using screen grabs to sort of express his vision when I was doing those reshoots, and I kept seeing enough directors who they were using this and needed something like this at the ready that I thought, okay, it should be valuable to the community. But yeah, it's been amazing. It's been amazing because of how genuinely grateful people are to have a tool that's made their jobs
significantly
easier and more efficient, and allowed them to sort of be more creative and express their vision. And it's like to see the biggest filmmakers in the world, like the Russos and David Leitch and all these other people use it, and all these big filmmakers, but also how many students use it has been incredible. Yeah, it's awesome.
On the business side of things, as a DP, you kind of have to think of yourself as your own individual business to a certain extent, and I mean that comes with taxes, finances, all those different attributes that come with it. But ShotDeck being a legitimate business that's not yourself as a freelancer, were there elements of you coming up as a freelancer? I know you went to school for economics, I believe, as well, that helped influence your ownership as a business owner, essentially. And did you find new things and challenges that you had to overcome starting this business?
I mean, starting this business is like a brand new, education. Yeah, it's been amazing. And even if I was an economics major, it was more that I had an interest in the way that economics, is sort of embedded in everything we do. But I think all filmmakers are their own entrepreneur, right? They're, like you said, they're their own business, right? So you constantly have to sort of create your own marketing and your own social media and and you have to be a freelance, so you have to do your own budgets and all these things, right? So you're already running your own business. Running this business has been one of the greatest joys of my life because it's such a new learning skill, right? So it's all the ways that you want, right? I remember when I first got in, I was an economics major. I wasn't a film major in school, but when I discovered film and thought, oh, I really want to do this, I already had an interest in photography, but I'm like, oh, let me try to take this on. All I wanted to do was learn. And for the first time in my life, I felt like education and school wasn't something for my parents or because that's what you do. You can't just not go to school. You go through high school and all that. And you take courses in math and science and all these other things that are kind of interesting, but often you feel like this isn't what I want to do with my life. Finally, with filmmaking, I was like, no, I desperately want to do this for my life. I want to learn as much as I can. Well, it's the same thing with this business. So it's a natural thing that just feeds your soul because you're like, oh, now I have to learn about payroll and I have to learn about laws and I have to learn about this and all the other things. So it's great, and I wish I could clone myself. So I had two of me because sometimes I don't have enough time. But I have an incredible team, and the good news about it being successful so far is that it's allowed us to build like an incredible team. And my co-founders who were there from the start with me are still working on it every day, and I still work on it when I'm not shooting, and when I'm shooting, I still work on it, but not as much. And they are incredible at running it and growing it, and we have so many people working for it. So that's a blessing because it allows it to grow even without me sort of looking over its shoulder every second of the day.
Not micromanaging it
at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so It's been awesome. It's been
Right.
awesome. And it's also the thing that keeps me up at night because I'm like, well, it's not everything yet what I want it to be.
Right.
So let's keep
I
making
was
it
going to
that.
ask how your personal life has changed since this business is kind of,
I mean, my wife is like, really, one more thing that
yeah.
just takes up your time. I mean, it's also that struggle. It goes right
Right.
back to where we started about just finding the balance between things that give you joy and satisfaction and energy from a work standpoint, and then still be present and available to your family and give them the time that they deserve, and finding whatever that balance is, right?
Absolutely.
So yes, having ShotDeck hasn't made that better,
Sure.
but it's also something that I really want to see to its finish. Yeah.
Right. And I love that it's not just a platform for people to just go and find stills. You're also building this community behind it with the recreation contests and having like really prolific judges, judge people's work and having prizes and all these different things. I just love the idea behind community in that.
Yeah, and I think there's stuff on our hit list to make that part of the community even
Even
stronger, and so
stronger.
that's stuff we'll be doing in 2025 for sure. But yeah, I look at it as way more than just this catalog and database of imagery that's keyworded. It's a place to basically discover new talent, right? It's like I want this to be the de facto resume tool of people,
Mm,
more than even IMDb. Like I genuinely say, like if you want to see my credits and you want to see what I've done, go look me up on ShotDeck versus IMDb
right.
because
Right.
it's a visual version of what I've
Mm,
done. So I'd rather you look at that and we can then talk about certain shots and go, how'd you do that? And
yeah.
oh, I like that. And oh, I
Yeah.
can see that person's work. I can see that
I love
person's
that.
work way more than just a list of credits on
Yeah.
IMDb,
And when I Think I'm Sick came on ShotDeck and I saw my name on ShotDeck for the first time as cinematographer, I was like, it was actually like a really cool feeling, to be honest with you, because I don't know. And then you guys shared it on your Instagram. It's just because it's something I use so often, to be able to see your name on a film on that platform was really awesome
No,
to
we love
see.
that too. We love
Yeah.
that. And that there's no question that, yeah, because again, it's all human curated. We
Right.
curate what we put on ShotDeck. And so there's a real, there's a place in which we make decisions on what goes up there. And
Hmm.
so that's something so far AI can't take the
Right.
place of. Yeah, we really have a lot of pride in how human made the whole site is.
Amazing. And I know that it's going to keep evolving, keep getting better.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I got a list of 100 things that I
Amazing.
want to happen. Yeah, for sure.
So I got one last question.
Yeah.
It's so I believe, if I remember correctly, you were 34 when you shot Garden State. Is that correct?
It came out 34. Yeah, I was probably 32 or 33
32,
when I
30.
shot
Okay.
it. Yeah, right. It came out
So
in 2004. That's correct. Yes.
I rewatched it again the other day. I love that movie.
Thanks.
But besides that, where you are today at this point in your life, in this point in your career, sitting across from that
Yeah.
32-year-old version of you that just shot Garden State, what advice would you give that younger version of you?
It's funny because sometimes it feels like longer than 20 years ago.
Mm,
And it also is kind of exciting to think of how much can happen in 20 years,
right.
right? Because it makes me then go, well, what's the next 20 years? It means I have an opportunity to like have as many things happen there, right? You look at Deacons and you look at, I mean, the coolest thing about being a DP is you can do it super late,
Yeah.
Philippe Rousselot is still doing it. Deacons is still doing it. Spinotti's still doing it. Like, I could go on and on. I'm missing already tons of like people that have been doing it for 40 or 50 years. One of the people that really inspired me to be a DP was Conrad Hall,
Hmm.
and the idea that he had, Butch and Sundance in 1969, and he had American Beauty in 1999, and he had Road to Perdition in 2000, I think, six. Like that's an incredible spread of
Right.
like exceptional work. And so I think what I would tell my younger self is you've got time, right? Like nothing happens overnight. The fact that even Garden State, which was such a seminal movie for me and it's such an important movie for the opportunities that it provided me, was 20 years ago, means that I was out here hustling for 12 years before that,
Mm,
right? It's
right.
like, so I moved out here right after college, so I was 22. So 10 years after that, I made Garden State. It came out, 2 years later, whatever it was, let's say, somewhere in that range. So this first 12 years was the foundation for the next 20, right? And so whatever you're doing now is not going to happen as fast as you want it to. But every single thing you do, I think about the stuff I did before that as being more foundational and exciting in a way than everything, as exciting as everything that followed, meaning that first movie I shot and all the things I learned and all the ways I pushed myself and was terrified and didn't know what I was doing, but still, got through it. The On the Borders and the shark attacks and the movies that are like really cut my teeth on.
Yeah.
And even the movie I made with my friend, Captain Jack, which was like right after college, that was our film school. That was probably as exciting as any 2 years of my life, making that movie, from like writing it to shooting it to selling it. Those were joyous times. And so every opportunity you have to shoot short film, music video, anything, is like a great opportunity, one, to start building your network of people that you're going to work with for the rest of your life, but also just, find something and create, right? Every day is an opportunity to create. Something. Yeah. And then it will happen. It'll happen in like moments. Like one thing will lead to something, and suddenly you're doing stuff you could have only dreamed of
course.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's definitely happened for me.
Amazing. Thank you.
Amazing.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate
fun.
it. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed today's episode.
Guys.
I'll see you next time. Peace out.